Ladies and gentlemen, there is a truth we often choose to ignore. The body speaks softly long before it cries out. One of the most profound examples of this silence lies in the story of the kidneys. These small, fist-sized organs perform the sacred work of filtering life itself. Yet they do so without complaint, without alarm, and without obvious signals. When damage comes, it does not arrive with sirens. It arrives like a shadow, unannounced, unnoticed, until the burden is already great. Why does this matter? Because the human condition is such that we take notice only when pain knocks on the door. We dismiss the invisible, forgetting that silence is not the same as safety. The kidneys can lose nearly 80% of their function before the body sends a clear warning. By then the path is harder, sometimes irreversible. In that silence lies a lesson about how we treat not only our bodies but also our lives. Think for a moment about the choices we make daily. We feed ourselves with processed creations. We overindulge in substances meant for moderation. We rely on pills to mask discomfort rather than addressing its source. We ignore the quiet rhythms of nature, hydration, rest, balance, and instead chase the stimulation of modern life. The kidneys, humble yet essential, absorb the weight of these choices. Over time, they weaken not out of betrayal, but out of loyalty to our neglect. This reality is more than medical. It is philosophical. It reflects how humans interact with truth. We look for drama, yet the most important shifts in health, in relationships, and in destiny itself happen quietly. They sneak in under the radar, shaped by thousands of small habits that accumulate into a fate we never intended. Kidney damage is simply one expression of this universal law. So what then is the antidote? It is awareness. Awareness of what we consume not only as food, but as thought, stress, and environment. It is the discipline to honor the body with water before reaching for soda, to choose rest over relentless stimulation, to eat what nature designed rather than what industry marketed. It is remembering that health is not the absence of disease, but the presence of harmony between body and mind, between inner wisdom and outer choices. And let us not forget the deeper tragedy. The greatest danger of kidney damage is not only the physical decline, it is the missed opportunity to live in alignment, to listen to the whispers before they turn into screams. When we ignore the silent organs, we also ignore the silent truths within ourselves, the intuition, the balance, the inner voice that urges us toward a higher life. Kidney damage sneaks up without warning, but ignorance is a choice and awareness is within reach. If we choose to live consciously, to respect the quiet miracles within us, then the warning need never come. The question is not whether the kidneys serve us, but whether we are willing to serve them in return. Thank you. Kidney damage develops silently, often without early symptoms, making awareness crucial. To understand why this matters, we must first reflect on the nature of the kidneys themselves. These organs, no larger than a clenched fist, quietly carry out some of the most essential tasks for sustaining life. They filter the blood, remove waste, regulate minerals, balance fluids, and maintain the delicate equilibrium of blood pressure and red blood cell production. They do all of this without demanding our attention. Unlike the heart, which beats loudly in its rhythm, or the lungs, which make us feel every breath, the kidneys work in silence. They do not remind us of their importance with daily sensations. And so because they are silent, we often forget they are there. This is where the danger lies. The silence of the kidneys is both their strength and their vulnerability. It is their strength because they are remarkably resilient, capable of compensating for lost function, capable of carrying on with their duties under enormous strain. But it is their vulnerability because they can be injured over years, even decades, before the individual has the faintest clue that something is wrong. This duality creates the tragic paradox of kidney damage. It advances invisibly, while the very resilience of the kidneys allows us to ignore the damage until it is too late. Consider the way symptoms unfold. In the early stages, there is no pain. There are no sharp warnings, no dramatic signals. A person may continue their routines, believing all is well, unaware that their internal environment is slowly shifting toward imbalance. By the time symptoms emerge, fatigue, swelling, changes in urination, the damage has often progressed to the point where intervention is complex, sometimes irreversible. Medical science tells us that kidneys can lose up to 80% of their function before the body makes its protest known. Imagine that, 4/5 of an organ's capacity gone, and still the person walks about with no idea of the storm brewing within. This reality forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about health and about life itself. What we do not see can hurt us. Silence is not safety. Absence of pain is not absence of damage. Our tendency as human beings is to equate the lack of symptoms with wellness. But the kidneys teach us that wellness is not measured by what we feel in the moment. It is measured by the state of balance within. When we neglect this balance, damage accumulates like water behind a dam. And when the dam breaks, it is too late to wish that we had paid attention sooner. The silent progression of kidney damage also reflects something deeper about human psychology. We live in a culture that reacts to crises but rarely cultivates awareness before they arrive. We prefer the dramatic intervention over the quiet discipline of prevention. We respond to the emergency but ignore the whisper. The kidneys remind us that wisdom lies not in waiting for the alarm bell, but in cultivating attentiveness long before the bell rings. Awareness then becomes the true medicine. To be aware of what we eat, how we hydrate, how we manage stress, and what toxins we expose ourselves to is to honor the kidneys before they fail. To understand that silence does not equal safety is to live more consciously, not only with respect to kidney health, but with respect to every hidden process in the body and in life. By acknowledging the quiet importance of these organs, we shift from a reactive posture to a preventive one. In doing so, we choose not only physical health, but a mindset of vigilance, humility, and respect for the things we cannot see, yet depend on every day. Modern lifestyle choices, diet, stress, medication, and neglect of natural balance are major contributors to kidney damage. And to understand this, we must look beyond the surface of habit and convenience to the underlying philosophy of how we live. Our bodies are designed for balance, for a natural rhythm between nourishment and elimination, work and rest, stress and recovery. Yet in today's world, we have disrupted these rhythms with choices that seem harmless in the moment, but accumulate into a profound burden for the organs that keep us alive. The kidneys in particular carry the weight of these disruptions because everything we consume, everything we put into our system must eventually pass through them. They are the final guardians of internal purity, yet they are forced to deal with the consequences of a lifestyle out of harmony. Take diet as the first and most obvious culprit. We live in an age where food is no longer simply food, but a product of industry. Excessive salt, refined sugar, chemical additives, and synthetic preservatives find their way into almost every packaged item. These substances overwhelm the body's ability to maintain equilibrium, and the kidneys, tasked with filtering and regulating, are left with a mountain of work they were never designed to handle in such volume. High-sodium diets elevate blood pressure, straining the delicate vessels within the kidneys. Excessive protein, particularly from artificial sources, increases the filtration load, demanding that the kidneys work harder with every meal. The illusion of abundance in modern diets hides the truth that what looks plentiful is often devoid of the natural balance the body requires. Then there is stress, an invisible toxin more damaging than many physical substances. Chronic stress shifts the body into a state of constant alarm, raising cortisol and adrenaline, tightening blood vessels, and disrupting circulation. Over time, this contributes to hypertension, one of the leading causes of kidney disease. Stress is not simply an emotion, it is a physiological storm that directly erodes the body's ability to maintain health. The kidneys, which depend on stable blood flow and pressure, become casualties of a mind that refuses to slow down, of a society that glorifies exhaustion as productivity. Medications, while life-saving in acute moments, also play a role when used carelessly. Painkillers, antibiotics, and even common over-the-counter remedies are filtered by the kidneys. In moderation, the body can cope. But in excess, these substances scar the kidney tissue, reduce efficiency, and accelerate decline. Here lies another paradox. In our attempt to relieve symptoms quickly, we often place a silent long-term burden on the very organs that sustain us. We treat discomfort at the cost of function, never realizing that the pill taken without thought is sometimes a trade of temporary relief for permanent damage. Neglect of natural balance completes the picture. Hydration is the simplest example. Water is life for the kidneys. It is their tool, their cleansing agent, their medium for filtering toxins. Yet so many replace water with sodas, energy drinks, and alcohol, none of which serve the kidneys as true hydration does. Rest, too, is often sacrificed, and without proper recovery, the body cannot heal, cannot regenerate, cannot maintain equilibrium. In neglecting the natural cycles of hydration, nutrition, movement, and rest, we ignore the foundation on which kidney health and indeed all health depends. When we look at these modern choices collectively, we see a pattern. It is not that one meal, one stressful day, or one pill destroys the kidneys. It is that thousands of small, unconscious decisions accumulate, layering stress upon stress until the kidneys can no longer keep pace. The tragedy is not in the single act, but in the gradual erosion of harmony. The body is forgiving, but it is not infinite. And when the balance is tipped too far for too long, damage manifests. This insight should awaken us to a new responsibility. It is not enough to simply avoid disease. We must live with awareness of the natural order our bodies were designed to follow. Every choice we make is either a step toward harmony or a step toward imbalance. The kidneys, silent and loyal, will endure as long as they can. But when our lifestyles relentlessly oppose nature, their silence eventually becomes suffering. Recognizing this is not only a medical necessity, but a philosophical one. It demands that we re-examine how we live, what we value, and whether convenience is worth the unseen cost. Health is not merely the absence of disease, but the harmony of body, mind, and environment. This statement may seem simple, yet it touches one of the deepest truths about human existence. We live in an age where health is defined by test results, by the lack of symptoms, by the notion that as long as nothing feels wrong, we must be well. But this view reduces health to a negative definition. It is only about what is not happening rather than what is. To say someone is healthy because they are not sick is like saying a garden is thriving simply because it has not yet withered. True health, like a thriving garden, is not only about survival, but about flourishing, balance, and vitality. The human body is not a collection of isolated parts, but a symphony of interdependent systems. Each organ, each cell, plays its role in maintaining equilibrium. The kidneys regulate fluids and minerals, the heart circulates blood, the lungs bring oxygen, and the brain orchestrates it all. But beyond biology, there is a subtle and often forgotten truth. The mind and body are not separate entities. Our thoughts, emotions, and perceptions are woven into the very fabric of our physiology. Chronic stress, resentment, or despair manifest physically. They tighten blood vessels, alter hormones, and disrupt digestion. Likewise, joy, gratitude, and peace foster healing. When we define health merely as not being sick, we overlook this profound interconnectedness. The environment, too, is inseparable from health. What we eat is shaped by the soil it grew in, the water it absorbed, the air that nourished it. What we breathe is determined by the purity of the atmosphere around us. What we feel is influenced by the culture we live in, the pace we adopt, the values we inherit. No individual exists apart from the environment, and therefore no definition of health can ignore it. If the air is toxic, if the food is artificial, if the culture promotes exhaustion over rest, then even the strongest body is quietly undermined. To be healthy in a sick environment is almost impossible, for the environment is not separate from us. It is part of us. Philosophically, this means health cannot be measured only by the absence of pathology. It must be seen as a state of balance, of harmony between the body's inner rhythms and the outer world. It is not static, it is dynamic, always adjusting, always responding. A healthy person is not one who never experiences challenge, but one who can adapt, who maintains resilience, who restores balance after the storm. In this way, health is less like a fixed destination and more like a flowing river. It changes, but it retains its essence through the ability to move, to adjust, to remain whole, even as conditions shift. This perspective also reframes our responsibility. If health is harmony, then every choice becomes an act that either supports or disrupts that harmony. What we eat, how we think, the environments we choose to inhabit, the way we handle stress, all of these ripple through the symphony of the body. Ignoring them may not produce disease immediately, but it creates disharmony, subtle at first, then louder until it manifests as illness. Thus, the true work of health is not waiting for disease to appear and then reacting, but cultivating balance daily in small, consistent ways. When we recognize health as harmony, we also recognize illness as imbalance. Disease is not an enemy that suddenly strikes, but the final expression of disharmony long in the making. High blood pressure, diabetes, kidney failure, these are not sudden intruders, but signals that the equilibrium has been disturbed for years, perhaps decades. The tragedy is that our culture often waits until these signals are undeniable before acting. But if we understood health as harmony, we would act much sooner. We would cultivate awareness, prevention, and conscious living, not as burdens, but as natural expressions of valuing life. Prevention requires conscious living, proper hydration, real food, stress management, and respect for natural limits. The idea may sound practical and straightforward, yet beneath it lies a profound philosophical challenge. To prevent disease is not simply to follow a checklist of habits. It is to live in alignment with principles that honor both the wisdom of the body and the laws of nature. Prevention asks us to step out of the reactive mindset that waits for illness before paying attention, and instead to live with awareness, choosing each day to support balance rather than erode it. It is the practice of mindfulness applied not only to thought, but to the physical vessel we inhabit. Proper hydration illustrates this perfectly. Water is the fundamental medium of life, the element in which every cellular process occurs. The kidneys, in particular, depend on water to filter waste and maintain equilibrium. Yet many people treat water as optional, replacing it with flavored drinks, stimulants, or alcohol. The truth is that no other liquid can substitute for the pure simplicity of water. When we deprive the body of what is most basic, we create an unnecessary burden that slowly accumulates. Choosing water consistently is not just about thirst, it is about acknowledging that life depends on honoring simplicity over indulgence. Prevention begins with such basic acts of respect. Real food is another cornerstone. Nature provides food as an integration of nutrients, fibers, and energies designed to nourish us fully. But modern culture has fragmented this wholeness, extracting and recombining in the pursuit of taste, convenience, or profit. Highly processed foods, stripped of natural balance, do not support the body in the same way. They overwhelm with salt, sugar, and additives, while offering little in terms of true nourishment. The kidneys are forced to filter the extract while the body slowly weakens from deficiency. Prevention through real food is not merely about avoiding disease, it is about living in gratitude for what nature offers, recognizing that the closer we remain to the original source, the more harmony we invite into our bodies. Stress management takes us deeper because stress is not only physical, but psychological. Chronic stress has become a defining feature of modern life, with schedules that demand more than bodies and minds were ever designed to endure. Stress is not just an inconvenience. It alters physiology, raising blood pressure, disrupting hormones, and directly straining the kidneys. Prevention, therefore, is not achieved by simply eating well or drinking water, but also by cultivating peace of mind, by learning to pause, to breathe, to allow space for recovery. True prevention acknowledges that mental storms are just as harmful as physical toxins. The discipline of calmness, of perspective, of choosing not to live in constant alarm is a preventive medicine more powerful than many prescriptions. Respect for natural limits ties all of this together. The body has boundaries, and prevention requires that we recognize and honor them. Sleep is one such boundary. The body cannot regenerate without it, and yet we treat rest as negotiable, something to be sacrificed for productivity or entertainment. Overeating is another violation, as is constant stimulation without moments of stillness. When we live as though the body has no limits, we borrow against a future we cannot afford. Prevention is the opposite. It is the wisdom of living within the limits of what nature intended, knowing that excess is always paid for eventually and balance always rewards. To live preventively is not a rigid or joyless existence. On the contrary, it is a life lived more fully because it is lived with awareness. Prevention asks us to notice the small choices and understand their long-term consequences. It is about building resilience rather than waiting for collapse. It is about valuing health as an active, dynamic state that we must cultivate daily rather than a passive condition we simply inherit. In the end, prevention through conscious living is not only about protecting the kidneys or avoiding disease, it is about living in such a way that every act affirms life rather than diminishes it. It is a philosophy of reverence for water, for food, for rest, for peace, and for the natural boundaries that sustain us. To live this way is to practice gratitude, not in words, but in actions, to treat the body as a sacred partner in the journey of life. Prevention is not merely a medical strategy, it is a way of being. The true tragedy is not only physical decline, but the missed opportunity to live in awareness and alignment before the warning signs appear. This idea pierces deeper than the medical consequences of kidney damage because it forces us to confront the way we live as conscious beings. Physical decline is tangible. We can measure it in numbers, in test results, in symptoms that manifest when the body begins to fail. But the greater tragedy is invisible, harder to grasp, and far more profound. It is the loss of time, the loss of awareness, the loss of the chance to live in harmony before the imbalance took root. Illness becomes not only a biological reality, but a mirror of missed possibilities, a reflection of choices made unconsciously. Kidney damage, like many chronic conditions, progresses quietly. A person may live for years without knowing that their daily choices are gradually eroding the function of an organ that sustains them. By the time the warning signs appear, the window for prevention has narrowed, sometimes closed entirely. This is the tragedy, not merely that the kidneys are failing, but that for years, opportunities to protect them, to live differently, to make conscious decisions were present but unrecognized. The silence of the kidneys is symbolic of the silence of life itself, the small daily moments where we could choose alignment but instead drift into unconsciousness. The human tendency is to awaken only when forced. We notice health when it is absent, appreciate balance only after chaos, and value simplicity only after it has been lost. But what if the real purpose of illness is to awaken us not to the damage itself, but to the awareness we neglected? Illness then becomes not just a breakdown of the body, but a teacher showing us where we ignored the subtle whispers of life. Yet the tragedy is that this lesson often arrives late, when damage is irreversible, when alignment is harder to achieve, and when the cost of neglect is already written into the body's fabric. From a psychological perspective, this reflects the deeper struggle of human beings. We live in distraction, in habits, in the illusions of permanence. We act as though tomorrow will always come, as though the body will endure endless abuse, as though health is guaranteed simply because it has been present so far. We fail to see that every choice either builds or diminishes life, and that the absence of immediate consequence does not mean absence of effect. The kidneys, by staying silent for so long, give us the illusion of safety, and this illusion is where the missed opportunity lies. Living in awareness means living in a state of presence with each decision. It means drinking water, not because thirst demands it, but because the body thrives on it. It means choosing rest not only when exhaustion forces it, but as a daily recognition of the body's need for renewal. It means recognizing stress as poison before it becomes pathology. Living in alignment means more than preventing disease. It means honoring the wisdom of the body before it cries out, respecting the laws of nature before they punish neglect, and valuing life itself before mortality reminds us of its fragility. The tragedy, therefore, is existential. It is the loss of a chance to live in harmony while the possibility was still open. It is the human pattern of sleepwalking through life, waiting for crisis to shake us awake. When the kidneys finally speak, when the body finally demands attention, we often look back in regret at years of unnoticed signals, not symptoms, but opportunities. The quiet choices we could have made differently, the alignment we could have embraced earlier, the awareness we could have cultivated day by day, all of these become the unseen losses behind the visible decline. Yet even in this tragedy, there is a path of redemption. To recognize that we missed the opportunity is itself a form of awakening. Awareness, even when late, is still awareness. Alignment, even when forced by necessity, is still alignment. The lesson remains. The body is not merely a machine to be used, but a partner to be honored. And life is not simply the avoidance of death, but the cultivation of harmony. In the end, the deeper tragedy is not kidneys failing or health declining. It is failing to live fully and consciously when the chance was given. Disease is not only a loss of health, it is the shadow of choices unexamined, of awareness postponed. To avoid this tragedy, we must learn to listen to silence, to recognize that prevention is not only about preserving the body, but about seizing the opportunity to live wisely before the warnings arrive. For once the warnings come, the body may be weaker, but the greater loss is that the life that could have been lived in awareness has already passed.